Welcome everyone. Parshat Shua Shiur, Yerushalayim HaKodesh, brought to you by Be There Israel and Or Chadash, live streaming. So this week we're learning Parshat Miketz. Before, we have to sing. So tomorrow night is Hanukkah. Gewalt, Hanukkah. So this is a nigun for Ma'od Sur from Michael Shapiro. Lives in Scottsdale, Arizona. Very, very beautiful nigun. Where's the sitter? Maybe I'll sing the words. Where's the sitter? Where?
This grave?
These?
Yeah.
Oh, they have Hanukkah in the back? Is this just those are for festivals? Rabbi, let's say. Yom Kippur. Where's Hanukkah? Okay, I won't sing all the words, but it's much better with the words. Ma'od Sur Yeshuati L'chana Elishabeach Tikom Beit Tefilati V'sham Toda Nizabeach Li'etachin Matbeach Mitzor Amanabeach Azegmor v'shir mizmor chanukah tamizbeach v'yagon kochi ki kala v'shibud malchut egla. Sorry. Rotsa v'nafshi v'yagon kochi kala Chayai marolu bekoshi b'shibud malchut egla Umiyado agedola hotzi et hasegula Chel paro v'chol zaro yardu ke'even mitzula Tavir Kadsho and Miani Vikam Shamlo Shakatati Ubano Geis Lehig Lani Kizari Mavadati Mayin Ra'amasafti Kimat Shavarti Kates Bavel Zerubbabel Lekate Shivim no Shati. I'm skipping. Yevanim nikbetzu alai azai bimei hashmanim ufartu chomot migdalai betimu kol hashemanim. Amano atar kankanim nasen isla shoshanim b'nei bina yemei shmona kaboshir urenanim di-di-dai-dai-dai-dai di-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai-dai Since many of you will be not watching this until Hanukkah, Hanukkah Sameach. Chaim v'chaim. Okay, tonight we're learning Parshat Miketz. And since we're not having a class next week, we'll learn a little bit of Vayigash also. And of course, we have to tie it into Hanukkah. So we'll start with the first pasuk. Mem Aleph, chapter 41, verse 1. So the previous parsha ends. Yosef has interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker. Exactly what he said would happen, happened. And the parsha ends that the butler not only did not remember him, but he forgot him. And Yosef had asked, please remember me and help me get out of here. I don't deserve to be here. I don't belong here. That's how the parsha ends. And this parsha begins, Vayihi Miketz Shanatayim Yamim Ufaro Choleim Mihine Omed Ala Ye'or. And it was at the end of 2 years of days, and Paro had a dream, and behold, he was standing on the banks of the Nile. So everyone asks, what does it mean at the end of 2 years? What does that mean exactly? So the simple understanding, of course, is 2 years later. But why does the Torah have to tell us that? It didn't tell us how long he was in jail up to now. Why all of a sudden does it have to tell us? So the Midrash tells us that in a certain sense he was destined to come out of jail after 10 years. But because he relied on the butler, it was considered somewhat of a blemish in his faith that God would take him out. And so therefore he spent 2 more years in jail. And then, out of no efforts of his own, God took him out. So this leads to many questions, because you would think, well, what was wrong with what Yosef did? I mean, it was fairly natural. It seems like a fairly natural thing to do. He's in jail. It may appear that he's there forever. Who knows? And he makes an effort to get out. So on the surface, it's like, of course, he should try something. And the answer is that it wasn't so much that he attempted to do something, but that in the littlest amount that we can imagine, he put his trust in the butler. Not like it was a strategy, but he put his trust in the butler, like 1/100th of 1%. And someone on the level of Yosef Atzadik, this was considered a blemish in his faith. So it reminds me of the story. Probably everyone knows the story, but in case there's one person out there who doesn't know this story, it's told over in many, many different ways. But there's a flood in a town, and they're evacuating everyone. And they come, police come to the house, and they say, well, you got to leave. The whole town is flooding. And he says, no, God will save me. Mm-hmm. Now the water's, up to, the first floor, and boats now. The streets have turned into raging rivers. So a boat comes by, the Coast Guard evacuating the last people. Jump on. No, God will save me. Now the flood is up to the roof. He's up on the roof, and a helicopter, lowers a rope and grab on. We'll take you away. He says, no, God will save me. 10 minutes later, the water washes him off the roof, and he dies. So when he goes up to heaven, and he's being judged, so he says, Master of the world, why did you let me drown? I put all my trust in you. And God said, I sent the police. I sent the Coast Guard. I sent the Air Force. What else could I do? So if you take that story, so God arranges it that the butler and the baker have dreams, and the butler is going to be restored to Paro. Why shouldn't he take that? But again, one of the answers is it was just a little tiny bit that he was really relying on the butler, and not that God would arrange it that the butler would then be able to bring him out. But again, if we would do that, it would probably be okay. But someone on the level of Yosef and Tzaddik to even trust in the smallest amount, so he spent 2 more years. So that's like the pshat. That's like the simple understanding. So I read an explanation from Rabbi Ginsburg, a very, very deep explanation. So first of all, when we go on, we see that Paro has 2 dreams. And after the first dream, it says that he woke up suddenly. In Pasuk Daled, it says, Vayigash Paro. Like just startled, he woke up. But what's interesting is the same word as Miketz. Right? He woke up suddenly is the same root as the name of the parsha, and it was at the end of. And then the second time also, same thing. Pasuk Chet, Vayigash Paro v'hinei chalom. He suddenly got up. So as we know, everything in the Torah is eternal, and everything in the Torah has to be applied to our own lives. So first of all, what does Miketz mean? Literally, that's what Rashi says. Rashi says, Misof, at the end of. And he says, V'chol Hashem Ketz, Sofu. How are you? Good? I brought your book. Here, let's sit on the side. We have the guys on the side. So that's what Rashi says, that any language of Ketz means end. So here it means the end of 2 years. So Rabbi Ginsburg gives over really an awesome Torah, because we're going to connect it now to Hanukkah. Because there's a verse in Eov that says, Ketz sam l'choshech. God has appointed an end time to darkness. Ketz sam l'choshech. The same word, Ketz. the end. So this verse is always applied to Hanukkah. Why? Especially this year. Doesn't always turn out this year, but Hanukkah begins tomorrow night, which is the 20, it actually begins on the 20th, but the day of the first day of Hanukkah is the 21st of December, which is the winter solstice, which means literally the seasons begin to change from the shortest nights and the longest days until June 21st, when it will be the longest day and the shortest night. So literally this year, it's Miketz Sam L'Choshech. There's an appointed time where Choshech, darkness, can't continue to spread. It will recede. So this is always applied to Hanukkah. Like I said, this year it's even astronomically, it works perfectly. Hanukkah always comes right around the solstice. But this year, the first day is literally on the solstice. So this parsha always comes out around Hanukkah also. So here there's a very deep connection where it says it was at the end of 2 years, and the idea that there is an end of darkness and there's an end of exile. That was the whole thing of the war with the Maccabees, because the choshech, the darkness, had spread to the point that a majority of the Jews had adopted Greek ways. The Maccabees were actually a minority. This is a part of the story that not everyone knows. And in today's parlance, they would be called politically incorrect. They took a very politically incorrect stance and drew a line. Mattathiyahu literally drew a line and said, everyone was for God, follow me. He drew like a line in the sand and said, Miketz Sam L'Choshech. The darkness ends here. We must fight back. We must fight back. So this parsha is always connected to Hanukkah. And the key here is the word Miketz. Now, it turns out that this word also is very, very important in relationship to Pesach. Why? Because Miketz is Gematria 190. And in the Haggadah, so it mentions that when we reached the end, God took us out of Egypt. And the sages learned from this that since Miketz equals 190, it turns out that we were really only in Egypt 210 years. We were supposed to be there 400 years. And God brought us out 190 years early, based on this word, Miketz. So again, that all relates to Miketz Sam L'Choshech. Because remember how we learned that we had fallen to the 49th level of impurity. And if we would have gone any farther, as it were, I mean, God could do anything, but as it were, we would have been lost. We would have been like a hopeless case, even for God, so to speak. Because of course God can do anything. But so to speak, we would have just been unredeemable. So God had to pull us out at that point. That was the case. So Rav Ginsburg says like this, in relationship to this idea of end, and because it's connected to Hanukkah. So he says, when someone is very, very far away from Yiddishkeit, from joy, from morality, whatever it is, but they've fallen very, very, very low. So he said, well, how do you help this person? So he said, basically there's two ways. The first way is, we're talking metaphorically, but sometimes it can be quite literal. You shine light on this person. You extend light. Light, love, concern, compassion. All of that comes under the rubric of light. And therefore, the person responds to the light, because most people do. And even if they only have a tiny spark within them, it will reverberate. Maybe not the first time, maybe not the second time, but if you shine enough light, it will awaken the light within the person, and then there could be some movement. And then Rav Ginsburg says, but what happens if that light is so dim that all the light in the world is not reaching this person? So how can this person be redeemed, can be saved? So Rav Ginsburg says, and I would imagine everyone listening to this has experienced this either, let's say, small time or big time, micro or macro. But many times, all the light in the world just is not helping us. That we have to reach the end ourselves. Now, in other words, the situation that we're in that is bringing us so much unhappiness and has distanced us so much from our true self or from God or from Yiddishkeit or other people has to play itself out until the person feels this is the end. Either it's literally going to end, or I'm going to have to make a new start here. And he said that for someone who's that unable to respond to light, that is about the only thing that will work. And so, like I said, in small ways and big ways, many people get to this place where getting to the end actually opens up a new beginning. But until you get to that case, you can't see beyond it. You can't see the beginning because you're too wrapped up in the middle. But once you really understand, like, this can't go on. I am at the end. I have to do something different. Then the world can open up to a person. So I just thought that was a very, very deep thing because I've experienced that many times on the mini level and also on the macro level. There's sometimes it could be once in a lifetime, or a few times in a lifetime, where a certain situation can go on for weeks, months, years, decades, until you feel, no, I can't be in the middle, I'm at the end. This is the end. And then there could be a rebirth. So Yosef at Tzaddik is, I don't remember ever learning that there was any way for him out of jail. I don't remember learning he got a 20-year sentence. He's just in jail, and it doesn't appear that there's any way for him to get out. But here it says, Vayihi Miketz shanatayim yamim. But here it's that God put an end because God had great plans for Yosef. Remember from last week, is Yaakov is guarding his dream that all his brothers are going to bow down to him. And even when he thinks he's not living anymore, he's still like something's not right here. And that's one of the reasons he couldn't be consoled. He couldn't be consoled because deep down inside, he didn't really believe it. He just it can't be. It can't be. So that's a very, very deep connection to Hanukkah also. Because we've learned a million times the importance of the idea that Hanukkah comes at the darkest time of the year. That's when we're lighting the candles. So it has so many different meanings, but here we're applying it very, very clearly to here, because Yosef is brought out of jail, and I don't know the time, an hour later, 2 hours later, he's the second most powerful person in the world in a matter of an hour or 2 hours. It's okay, so that was just one idea. Okay, now there's so many things in the parsha. So now we're going to look at one aspect of Paro's dreams. So if you go to Pasuk Yud Aleph. So Paro wakes up, and the same Mem Aleph 41, chapter 41. So Paro's had 2 dreams. He wakes up and he's very disturbed because all of the wise men of Egypt tells him the dream. The text says no one could interpret the dream. But we're told in the Midrash that they did interpret his dream, but he didn't like any of the interpretations. So it sounds like, he's kind of fickle. No, I don't like that one, I don't like that one. But it's much deeper than that. Because there's an idea that many times when we have a significant dream, we're given the interpretation also within the dream state. But when we wake up, we remember the dream but not the interpretation. So when Paro heard these interpretations, it says, no, that's not it. Because deep down in his unconscious, when he would hear the right interpretation, he would say, oh yeah, that's it. Because intuitively he would know that it's right. So that's why when Yosef says what he does, so Paro was like, yeah, that's it. Right? That's it. But we have a very significant thing here, because the butler, now he steps forward. Right? 2 years later, he steps forward, and he says to Paro, remember when you sent me to jail, and I and the butler had a dream on the same night, and there was a young man there, and he interpreted the dreams. But the way that the language is, and he says it twice here, in 2 different verses, he says that he interpreted the dream according to the interpretation, and so it was. And from this, the Gemara learns in Masechet Brachot that a dream goes according to the interpretation. Now, this is, in a sense, counterintuitive. Because if you mean well, whatever I say a dream means, that's what it means. And that's the full significance of dreams, then like you're missing something. The Gemara actually says that the interpretation has to be in the realm of possibility for the symbols in the dream. In other words, you can't just come up with any interpretation and say, well, that's what the dream means. But it's not. It's more than that. What the Torah is saying, what the Gemara is saying, is that the dream plays itself out according to the interpretation. It's much more than I'll interpret it the way I want to interpret it. What it means is, according to the way you interpret a dream, that's how it will manifest itself. And in a sense, it's counterintuitive. Because then we're saying that, well, dreams really have no meaning. It's only what significance you put to them. And that is not entirely true. So it's a enigmatic statement that a dream goes according to the interpretation. So what do we mean by it? What do we mean by this? So we see in Jewish thought many different ideas that fit into this very, very, very well. One of them is Gam zu l'tova. This is also for the good. What just happened? Chas v'sholom. Some terrible thing just happened. And a person says, Gam zu l'tova. Like, I don't understand this, but it must be for the good. This is also for the good. So, depending how you look at it, you could say that's pretty naive, or that's pretty like having your head in the sand. But no, this is a very, very fundamental Jewish principle. What does it mean? It means that we believe that everything that God does is for the good. We also know that that good many times is not revealed. We don't understand it. And the face of it looks just the opposite. But we have this core belief, Gam zu l'tova. This will also be revealed to be for the good. Now this is something we can sometimes understand and sometimes not understand. But I think everyone's had those experiences where something unpleasant or negative or bad happens to us. And we're really upset. And then a minute later, an hour later, a week later, a year later, it becomes clear to us, this was really for the good. This really was for the good. It's not like I'm putting this spin on it and I'm faking it out. This really was for the good. I didn't see it. It didn't feel like that. But it was for the good. So in other words, this idea, a dream goes according to its interpretation. Well, that applies to life as well. Life goes according to our interpretation of the dream, of our reality. Two people could be going through the same, more or less, reality, and one will be totally bummed out, depressed, and the other person will let it roll off their back. You can have two people standing next to each other at the kotel, and one is having the deepest prayer they've ever had in their whole life, and the person next to them is like, what's the big deal? These are just stones. Like, what's the big deal? It all depends on how we're relating to reality. One of the most stark examples is at a funeral, when literally in front of the coffin, the body, we do what's called tziduk din. We justify the judgment. Now that's sometimes difficult. If someone dies at an old age, and they've lived a good life, it's much easier to do. But what happens, chas v'shalom? Chas v'shalom, we should never know. But someone dies in an accident, unexpected, or just has a heart attack and just, right? And at the funeral, we say all these verses saying God is just, God knows best. There's no crookedness in God's judgment. Like that's stark. That's stark. But that's a basic Jewish belief. That if we can't feel it at the moment, but we still say it, and we try to believe it until it does become clear to us. So there are two places in the whole story with Yosef and his brothers that we can see this very clearly. So if you jump ahead in the art scroll, it's on page 236. It's chapter 42. Chaf Aleph, right at the top of the page. Okay, so here we're jumping ahead in the story, but everyone knows where we just left off. Yosef interprets the dreams of Paro. Paro makes him in charge. And the 7 years of plenty have gone by. And they've done what Yosef said. They've stored up 20% of the grain. And now there's a famine everywhere. And people are flocking to Egypt to get food, including his brothers. They come down, and the Torah says they don't recognize Yosef, but he recognizes them. And he also recognizes that this is the fulfillment of his dream, because they bow down to him. They literally bow down to him. And then he realizes this is the fulfillment of the dream. It went according to his interpretation. So he accuses them of being spies, and they tell the whole story. We're all from one family, and we have a younger brother who's back in Eretz Canaan with our father. And he said, okay, I'll take one of you as a guarantee. Bring down your young brother, and I'll know if you're telling the truth. So they're like, they can't believe this is happening. And then they say the following. They say, V'yomru ish al achiv, Aval ashemim anachnu al achinu, asher ra'inu tsarat nafsho, b'hit chanano aleinu, v'lo shemanu, al ken ba'a aleinu at sarazo. So they said, one to the other, we are to blame. Us and our brothers, that we saw the sorrow of his soul, meaning Yosef, sorrow of his soul, when he pleaded to us, and we didn't listen. Therefore, this terrible occurrence is coming upon us. So, first of all, this is obviously a great stirring of tshuva here. But when you really think about it, this is an amazing thing. This is 22 years later. This is 22 years after they sold Yosef. And this thing has happened to them. They thought they were going to come get some bread, and now Shimon is being held in jail, and now they have to go back and tell their father, but they connect the dots. Because they could have interpreted it different. They could have said, like, who is this guy? Like, why did he do this to us? We don't deserve this. Like, what's going on here? But instead, their initial reaction is, this is happening because of what we did to Yosef. So in other words, this is an example of an interpretation of reality. Something is happening to them, and they're interpreting it as a direct cause and effect of what they did 22 years before. Which is actually an amazing thing that they make the connection, not knowing that that's Yosef standing right there. Not knowing, so you could say, maybe on an unconscious level they felt his presence, which actually would be like a very deep way to explain this. Like, what moved them to make that connection? So one answer could be is because they felt their presence. I don't know about anyone else, but this happens to me all the time, and I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. I'll be, sitting somewhere, and for no logical reason, I start thinking of a person, and 5 seconds later, the person walks into the room, or the phone rings, or I'm sitting in front of the computer, and an email comes in from them. It's like, right? This is like they say that a butterfly flaps its wings in Indonesia, and there's a tornado in Kansas. It's like, in other words, the invisible web that connects everything is so amazing. But when it happens to you enough times and you realize, why did you start thinking this person out of nowhere? Because as they were walking down outside, you don't see them, you pick up their presence. Totally unconscious, but you feel their presence, which produces a thought about this person. So, the truth is, I'm only thinking this now. I never thought this before. But I realize that this is a very deep possibility that they were able to make this connection because they're standing in front of Yosef and they don't know it, but they're picking up on his energy. That's one possibility. Now, if we jump to Vayigash, page 252 in the art scroll. So, Yosef, we're jumping ahead. Yosef has just revealed himself to his brothers. And they're like in shock. So if you go to Pasuk, Hey, Mem Hey Hey, 45:5, it says, V'ata al ta'atzvu, v'al yichar be'inechem, ki mechartem oti heina, ki lemichye shalachani elokim lifnechem. So he says to them, they're not able to talk to him right now. They're in like total shock. And he says, and now, don't be sad, and don't have anger in your eyes that you sold me to here. Because to provide for you, God has sent me before you. So what is Yosef saying? Yosef is saying, you sold me. But on a different plane, on a different level of reality, God sent me before you to provide for you. And then later in Vayigash, Yosef says it a second time, but almost stronger. He says to them, you meant to do me evil, and God meant it for the good. So all three of these actually, on the side of these two on the side of Yosef, is also his interpretation of reality. Because if anyone had a reason to be angry or to hate or to want to take revenge on his brothers, it was Yosef. He's like the classic case of someone who rightfully we would expect to want to take it out on his brothers. And in both interpretations, and we can only imagine what Yosef went through in order to come to that level. That he no longer, he understood that they sold him. And that he understood that they did an evil thing. But he also understood there was something else happening here. God meant it for the good. God sent me in order to provide for my family. And that's how he interpreted it. And therefore, that's how he treated his brothers. Because that's how he interpreted it. So therefore, that's what it was. So that's what we're learning. The dream goes according to its interpretation. So the point I'm trying to make here is we're not talking just about dreams. We're talking about reality in general. And I'll share with you, I think Moshe has heard this before, but I'll share with you that it must be 15 years ago, I went to Kever Yosef. That's when Rav Ginsburg had a yeshiva at Kever Yosef, or Yosef High. And then in the Intifada, it was destroyed. So I went, and in the middle of the classes, I went out to the kever, and there was no one there. And it was a type of grave where it was no taller than here, waist high, and it was curved. And so I did something that I had read that people did, especially the Arizal. It's a known thing that most of the graves in the north of the country that have all these great sages and Kabbalists, and going back 2,000 years, it was the Arieh who identified them. How did it identify him? Because a lot of the time, he and his students learned outside. So they were always kind of going different places, and they'd find a good place, and they would sit and they would learn. And many times when he was going on the way, he would stop at a certain place, and he would get down and like literally sprawl on the ground until he would get up and he would say, so-and-so is buried here. That's how many of the graves in the north of the country were identified. Some of them have been, from traditions all the ways back, all like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, all the ways back, unbroken chain. But many of them were identified by the Arieh. So there's this thing to like sprawl out on a grave. Again, usually the graves are in a way that you can't do that because of their size or. So anyway, so I was in there alone, And so I literally sprawled myself totally on Rabbi Yosef's grave and just like tried to be like a sponge. I just tried like open my ear and like, Yosef and Tzaddik, like talk to me, like tell me something. And I was there for quite a while and no one was there. And at one point, the thought that came to me, like very, very, very strongly, was that why was Yosef called Yosef at Tzaddik? As we mentioned, he's like the one person who has this name attached to him. Yosef at Tzaddik. The answer that's usually given is because of his ability to withstand the temptation of the wife of Potiphar. Tzaddik has to do with the sphere of Yesod, and Yesod has to do with sexuality. And because he was able to pass this test, he gets the name Yosef at Tzaddik. But when I was lying in the grave, what came to me, what I received was, why is he called Yosef at Tzaddik? Because he was able to control, not just control, to get over any anger or any desire for revenge, and to love his brothers and to bring the whole family together. That's why he's called Yosef at Tzaddik. So I remember it was like a revelation. And so I went and I told Rav Ginsburg, and he says, yeah, that's correct. And then later I heard Rav Shlomo say it also. No, it wasn't my chiddush. It wasn't like I thought of this. But that's what I heard, that's what I received, that the name Tzaddik is even more this ability to overcome anger. Rabbi Shlomo used to teach about this all the time. It's one of his constant themes, how we have to overcome anger. Because it's such a natural feeling, it's a natural tendency. And we're talking about, from little things to big things. But these flashes of anger, and even when they last a long time and with different people, so Rav Shlomo was always saying, like, you have to get over anger. To be a truly spiritual person, you have to get past anger. Okay, so this connects very, very much with Hanukkah also. Because we started the class by saying that this parsha is always coming out. Like, sometimes Hanukkah has two Shabbos, so you actually have two parshas. And it comes out a little bit different every year, but Parsha Miketz is always like right, either during Hanukkah, right before, right after. It's like always like right in there. So we already alluded to it, and it's a very, very important connection. Why is this whole story of Yosef and his brothers happening during Hanukkah? So I already said that this is a part of the story of Hanukkah that many people don't know. That there were actually two wars going on. There was a war of the Maccabees against the Greeks, and there was a war of the Maccabees against the Hellenists. And they both were quite real. they were both quite real, that had the Maccabees failed, so they would have gone down in history as total fanatics. Total fanatics. But they won. So it's important to understand that, because this puts things in perspective. The one thing, and I remember there was, I'm trying to think who put it out. I wonder if you just Google it. It was this great video, maybe 12, 15 minutes. It was shot, I believe, near the Moshav, because the Moshav is Maccabee country. The whole story of Hanukkah comes in that area. And they kind of told the whole story of this war of the Maccabees and the Hellenists through one family, of a Hellenist family who have a son, and the wife is still somewhat traditional, and she wants her son to have a bris. And the father, who now speaks and dresses and everything like a Greek, does not want. And so this whole video is very, very powerful, because it's known that at a certain point, when the Maccabees got stronger, they were forcibly giving Brit Milah to all the boys. They would go into villages and they would give all the boys, whether the families liked it or not. Yeah, they were very, 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 very strong. They were very, very strong. When they won, so then the tide turned. Many people who had become Hellenists kind of reverted back. But it was a long process. Many people also don't know that the war with the Greeks lasted for 25 years. And the story of Hanukkah happens in the third year. In other words, from the day that Mattatyahu drew a line in the sand until they retook the temple was 3 years. But that was really only the beginning of the war. People don't know this. Remember, there were 5 brothers. At the end of the 25 years, only one remained. Four of the 5 died in different battles, including Yehuda Maccabee, died in different battles. And it was only after 25 years that the Romans were starting to become a power. And so Shimon was the last of the brothers. He played off the Romans against the Greeks, and he maneuvered for autonomy in between them, and he got it. But during that 25 years, this battle between Jew and Jew continued. Most of the time it wasn't a physical battle, unless the Hellenists literally were fighting with the Greeks, but it was a cultural battle. So when you think about it, the connection here is we're reading this right during the whole story of Yosef and his brothers. And then by next week, there's the reconciliation. But last week and this week, we have a family divided. We have a fractured family. And we know that this family is Am Yisrael. This is an archetype. And that's why the question that we've addressed many times is, like for many, many people, when they read many of the stories in the Torah, it's like, what is this doing in a holy book? People selling their brother? Brother killing brother? Incest? War? Like, what kind of a holy book is this?
Bestseller.
It's a bestseller. I remember telling you that maybe it's 4 or 5 years now, on one of our many trips to the States. I spent a lot of times at airports, in airport bookstores, and there was a Time magazine, and the cover story was about the Bible. So I opened it up, and I'll never forget this. It was like, this is absolutely true. The first paragraph of this article is exactly said. It starts like war, rape, incest, murder, more words like that, right? A whole list of words saying, no wonder it's the best-selling book in all of history. That's how this article begins. But still, the idea is like, one would think that God would not want to show the dirty laundry of Am Yisrael in front of everyone. Brother selling brother. But the Torah is reality. And this story is the story of Am Yisrael. It's not just a family. And it's a story that plays itself out in every generation. We know all too well how this story fits into the complex makeup of the Jewish people today, the state of Israel. The same energies are still here, dealing with the same conflicts, same predicaments. That's why it's in the Torah, because it's reality. But the hope is next week there's a reconciliation. After doing like the worst thing you could possibly do to your brother, sell him as a slave. The one who's sold as a slave engineers a reconciliation. So that is messianic. So I'm mentioning because it's next week's parsha. We're not having a class. I wanted to mention a little bit about that, because what's called it's parsha Vayigash, where Yehuda approaches Yosef. And in all the Hasidic Sfarim, it's treated as the archetypal meeting of two levels, the Baal Tshuva and the Tzaddik. Yehuda is the Baal Tshuva and Yosef is the Tzaddik. And Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. It's considered an archetypal meeting. That's why every word, like there's nuances and deep understandings. But the connection with Hanukkah is that Hanukkah is very, very messianic. It's a very, very messianic holiday. And we know this is a very, very beautiful thing, is at the end of next week's Parsha, so Yaakov and the whole family come down, and in next week's Parsha, and then in Vayechi, they're given the land of Goshen. And with this, we'll end the class. They're given the land of Goshen, and sometimes it's called Goshna, and sometimes Goshen. So it's brought down. I just read today, I didn't know the source, that it was the Bnei Yisachar, apparently, who first noticed this, is that the letters for Goshna are the same letters on a dreidel. Gimel, Shin, Nun, Hey.
For Galut.
For Galut. for Galut, is Goshna. And Goshna equals Mashiach in Gematria. Equals Mashiach. And so the whole idea of, when we talk about Mashiach fighting the final wars, rebuilding Yerushalayim, rebuilding the temple, so very connected to Hanukkah. Brother and brother being reconciled. So we will end the class with a bracha that Am Yisrael today should be like Yosef and his brothers, that with all whatever tension, whatever disagreements, whatever different interpretations of reality, that there's a reconciliation. That Am Yisrael is brought together. And when we're brought together, that only then can really the light shine. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir. But it's very, very connected. That's the connection between the light of Hanukkah and this story here. Because again, when Hanukkah was happening, it was brother against brother. But by the end, at the end of the 25-year war with the Greeks, we had autonomy again. And there was a reconciliation. So we should hope that it can happen again, and that the light, there's an Or Chadash, Al Tzion Ta'ir, a new light shines from Zion and shines to the whole world. Amen.